Welcome back to Soccer Unscripted, the podcast where we deep dive into the world of soccer from every angle. Whether you're a seasoned fan or just starting to explore the sport, this is your go-to space for all things soccer. I'm your host, Daisy Vigueras, and I'm a lifelong soccer enthusiast. I'm here to explore the conversations, debates, and moments that make this sport so captivating. In this episode, we'll be diving into what it truly takes to make it as a professional soccer player. From the dedication to the mindset and skills needed to achieve playing at the top level. We'll also explore the transition from playing to coaching, the challenges and rewards of shaping youth athletes, and practical advice for the next generation yearning to play at the highest level. Whether you're an aspiring pro or simply curious about the journey, this conversation has something for everyone. Today on Soccer Unscripted, we have a special guest who knows exactly what it takes to reach the top. From competing as a professional with LA Galaxy to now shaping future stars as a coach at Sierra Canyon High School, his journey is filled with valuable lessons for aspiring players. We'll be talking about what it really means to be a pro, how to get there, and the key factors in player development. I'm excited to introduce RAFA GARCIA. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
My first question for you is, RAFA, you had a remarkable career, including playing for LA Galaxy. So can you take us back to your early years and what first sparked your passion for soccer?
Yeah, I think like many kids in our community, from a very young age, I was drawn to the game. Didn't really know what it was. I think we all aspired to be professionals when we were kids, but didn't really know what that meant. I just knew that I loved playing and I enjoyed competing, and I love scoring goals and all that fun stuff. But yeah, around 4 or 5 years old is when I started playing soccer. My first soccer team actually played here down the street at Atlantic Park, and I have a very deep appreciation for for Canoga Park. It's where I grew up, and really this is where my journey started. And ironically, I still spend a lot of time around here. My kids are playing rec soccer here, so it's kind of full circle. But yeah, from a very young age, I fell in love with the game, like many kids that I grew up with, and I was fortunate enough to get to play professionally. But without a doubt, it was an interesting journey, one filled with a lot of sacrifices, a lot of hard work. But I think looking back, and I was just asked this question a couple of days ago, would you change anything? I wouldn't change anything, really. I think my journey was I was one of the guys that was able to live the dream that a lot of us had, and I feel very fortunate to have been able to do that. But it came with a lot of trials and tribulations, and looking back, I think my journey or my path, I think a lot of people can relate with it, which I think makes it that much more special for me. But yeah, I'm just happy to have been, to have gotten where I did as a professional player. And now that I'm coaching, the biggest thing for me is how can I kind of pay it forward and give back a lot of the knowledge that I gained over the years. And that's kind of led me to where I am now, coaching.
Yeah, no, that's so amazing. And you mentioned that you went through some hardships, and obviously you fought your way to get to where you are today. So I just want to ask, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced when you were working your way up the ranks, and how did you overcome them?
Without a doubt, my biggest one of my biggest hurdles was overcoming injuries. I think I was about 18 years old when I had 15 years old was the first time I had a significant injury. I broke my leg. I broke my right shin. And really, I joke with people all the time. I still don't know to do anything else but soccer. So the times that I was away from the game, it was hard. It was definitely hard. Once I got into college and was playing at the Division I level, I tore my ACL, tore my meniscus. So countless injuries. But those were some of the hardest things for me as a player. Off the field, it's hard to balance soccer, right? And I think this is something that a lot of people don't really take into consideration. You are really giving up a lot of your social life, at least in my case. I missed birthdays, I missed, anniversaries. I missed a lot of things because the reality was like I was always playing on the weekends. And I remember when I was in high school, I hated coming to school on Mondays because all my friends are talking about, hey, you missed this over the weekend, and we did this, and I was, at the Oaks Polo Fields playing, which I loved, but I feel like I had to give up something. So the social piece was something that I had to give up in order to focus on soccer. And that's not necessarily the easiest for a teenager, right? So that was tough, but I always knew that, kind of laying that groundwork and being disciplined and kind of focusing on my craft would always pay off. At least I hoped it would, and thankfully it did. But injuries are tough, and that's part of the reason why I moved on from playing. I think I was at the point where physically I couldn't do it as well as I wanted to, and it was the right time to move on. But I think those are the biggest things. Obviously, for a young kid, giving up, spending time with their friends, and this is way before you were around, and and social media and all that. Like we would actually hang out and be actually doing things. So that was tough. But again, I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I think my journey was unique in the sense that not many people from San Fernando Valley get to live out their dreams. So I was very happy to represent the Valley, and that's something that I think to this day I hold pretty dear in my heart, and I'm very proud of it.
No, that's amazing the way you push through injuries, and now we see ACL tears are way more prominent. And I myself, just like out of 10 friends that I have, 3 of them have torn their ACLs.
Yeah, the girl side as well, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and on that side comes with like mental challenges.
Sure.
Will I ever get back to playing? So how would you say you got past that, and like what advice would you give to players now?
Great question. You're great at this, by the way. These are good questions. It's definitely it was a mental challenge. And I think I realized this a couple years ago when I was actually sitting down with a friend doing a podcast similarly. I didn't know this at the time, but when I got hurt, I went through a depression. And I didn't understand it at the time, but again, soccer is, it still is a big part of my life. So when you are removed from the thing you love to do, like it's tough, and I was young. I was 18, 19. I was depressed, and it was a struggle. And I was a young college student, and I was doing things that I probably shouldn't have been doing, right? And I didn't realize it until afterwards. I was like, wow, I actually went through something that was pretty, it was pretty traumatic for me, not being able to do what I love to do. The biggest thing for me, and I go back to this, one of the ways that I was able to kind of move forward and get through it, I had a huge support system. My family has always been they've always been my biggest supporter. So I knew on any given day where if I wasn't feeling great or feeling like myself, I would always just go to my mom's and hang out and be around family, and kind of would, all my worries and all my frustrations would kind of disappear. But without a doubt, my family was and still is, a big part of why I got so far in soccer. They always supported me, my parents, my siblings, later on when I got married, my wife, my kids now. They're really the motivation and the drive behind why I do everything. But without a doubt, having a good support system, even friends who would always, reassure me, you're going to be fine, you're going to come back stronger. And but it did come with its hardships, and being disciplined at a young age, and going to rehab and doing stuff that you don't love to do, and it was painful as well. And mind you, you're talking, almost 20 years ago. Medicine wasn't as advanced as it is now in terms of recovery for ACLs and meniscus tears and all that. So it was challenging. It was definitely challenging. But to answer your question, a big way of me dealing with it was just having a great support system.
Oh, yeah. And with that, I feel like surrounding yourself with the right people, especially in college where you don't have your parents to tell you that.
Right.
how would you say you were able to like find the right people for you, or find friendships that would hold you up
Yeah.
and not bring you down?
Ironically, and I don't even know why or as fate would have it, my roommate at the time tore his ACL the exact same game that I did. We were living together, and we they would refer to us as the Crutch Brothers because we would just be crutching around. We're both going through it, and that honestly, looking back, was shout out Devin Deldo if he's watching. We just would support each other, and the days that it was harder on me, he would like kind of lift me up and push me. And the days where he was kind of going through it, I'd give him a kick in the behind. And so we kind of held each other accountable. But that was it was a very interesting time. But just finding, to your point, just finding good friends and good support system can be a huge game changer. Absolutely.
I mean, were there any turning points in your journey where you thought, wow, like this is where I could really make it pro? Or was it just, it came as a surprise to you, or obviously you put in hard work? So.
Yeah, I think maybe when I was about 16, 17, I knew I had a legitimate chance. Back then, and this is different now we have MLS academies, we have, a lot more opportunities. Before, really the pathway to making it here, at least in MLS, you would essentially go to a Division I college, play there a couple years, and if you're good enough, you would get drafted. That was my path, right? So I earned a scholarship to play at Cal State Northridge, and I want to say when I was 16, 17, I knew, okay, I have what it takes to play at the D1 level. And I knew that doing that well enough could, earn me an opportunity. Because that's all I was really looking for, just an opportunity. It's very difficult to go from high school straight to the pros, even then. And now even more so. So I think around 15, 16, 17, where I was like, okay, I have an opportunity to do this. I played my first year of collegiate soccer. And my coach, Terry Davila, told me, hey, there's some professional teams here in MLS that have inquired about you and are interested in you potentially, playing at the next level. And he's like, but just, don't get a big head, just kind of keep working.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what I did. And as fate would have it, my sophomore year is when I tore my ACL. I had to sit out a year. I think if I hadn't gotten hurt, maybe within a year or two, I could have been drafted. Who knows? But essentially, it just pushed me back a couple years. And after my senior year, I redshirted a year and played my last season at CSUN. I was invited to the MLS Combine, and then from there, I was drafted by LA Galaxy.
And I mean, that's honestly such an amazing accomplishment, being drafted there. I know a lot of athletes today, with scouts going to games or scouts attending showcases, they deal with performance anxiety. Sure. So would you say, how did you deal with that when you were there?
It's definitely a thing, and this is something that I don't think we talk about enough. The anxiety's there, and some people mask it really well, and some people get overcome by it. I think I was one of the lucky ones where I could compartmentalize or channel it in the right way. I didn't really shy away from challenges, and that was always my mindset. Like, I would remind myself, hey, if they're here or they're scouting you, it's for a reason, right? You've kind of earned it, and you've put yourself in a position to kind of be on the radar. But it's tough. It's tough, and one thing I realized later in my career, once I was playing with the Galaxy, we had a team psychologist, right? And I'd spend time with him, and it's kind of taboo talking about anxiety and mental health, but in sports it's very much a thing, especially with collegiate students and even high school, balancing an academic schedule and balancing soccer and then trying to balance social life. It's a lot. It's a lot. So I would encourage people to just reach out and I think for me, for my players now, I try to be there and tell them, hey, if there's something that you need from me, whether obviously off the field, if it's, let's not even talk anything soccer related, but like if you need help with anything, I'm here, right? And I want to be a resource, and I can share, what I would do, and maybe that helps them, and maybe that, puts them in a position to perform better. But it's definitely a thing, and I think, the more we educate ourselves with, the anxieties of performing at a high level, the more we become aware of this, I think the better, kind of the conversation will go, and I think the players will get the help that they need, definitely.
No, yeah, definitely being that support system for your players and honestly, even friends.
Yeah.
And with this, I know you're a coach at Sierra Canyon High School now. How would you say you instill this mentality of hard work and being able to discipline yourself from such a young age? How would you say you instill this now in your high school players?
The only way that I could really help them is by sharing my experiences, right? Because I've been through it, right? So not only sharing the positive things, but also the bad things, right? Like, hey, learn from my mistakes, essentially. I didn't get it right all the time, and I made mistakes on the field, off the field. Hey, I was a kid as well, so no one ever has it down perfectly. But I think for me, the biggest thing is like, hey, let me help you. Let's have a conversation. But it is hard. It is hard to keep, to hold kids accountable. I refer to them as young adults, and the way I explain it to them is I want to help them reach their potential, whether that's playing Division I soccer professionally or not playing, right? Whether they move on to the workforce or go to schools and universities. I really try to instill in them, in the most basic ways, the way you do, anything is how you do everything, essentially. So if you kind of go through the motions and don't really care, and you're not really committed to something, those are the results you're gonna get, right? And it's hard to, it's hard to crack into, break those barriers and kind of, I say I'm always like peeling layers back like an onion, right? And, some get it, some don't. But I think my job as a teacher, I guess you could say, is to continue to push and try to educate them as best as I can. And if I could help them in a small way or in a big way, I think I've done my job.
No, that definitely sounds like you're that coach that could have a huge impact in their life.
Sure.
And that coach that when they're maybe making it to pro or playing D1 soccer, they're like, yeah, well, Coach Rafa, he was one of the big influences in my life. So with that, is there a coach in your life that was your influence, that was who you look back at now and you're like, wow, he had like such a significant place in my life?
I was very fortunate to have some very good coaches. Not so much in the sense of like, well, these guys are just like really good tactically, or, they know how to coach really well. I had really good coaches in the sense that I had some really good people around me. And to your point, I think a coach, whether a good coach or a bad coach, could have an impact in someone's. For example, I run into people and they're like, well, I had this guy as a coach. They're like, wow, I can't stand that guy, right? So you have an effect on them in a negative way. And then, there's another coach. Oh, I had this guy as a coach. I love him. He's helped me so much. To answer your question, a few off the top of my head, Terry Davila over at CSUN was and still is a big mentor to me. Someone that really showed me what it was like to just compete and, more than anything, just try to be a good person. That's something that he instilled in me. Jake Gwynn over at Canoga Park, I had for a couple years. Just he would take the shirt off his back to help you, with whatever you needed. In club, I had a few guys, Steve Lucy, who I played with at Arsenal, Keith West, who I played with here at West Valley Samba. My first club coach, Greg Avila, who, looking back, I want to say he was only 19, 20 years old at the time, and I might have been like 11. I still remember, like, he had a positive impact in me because he knew how to, like, communicate, right? And sometimes as coaches, we get so caught up in, all the other things that communicating, we kind of take that for granted sometimes.
Yeah.
And the best coaches that I had were just really good at communicating and also just being brutally honest. And that's one thing I don't think coaches do enough of. They kind of say what the players want to hear. I'm very much the opposite. Hey, you might not love this, but I promise you it's gonna help you.
Yeah.
And I think, being totally honest and transparent, for me, carries a lot more weight than me telling a player something that he wants to hear. And one of my coaches, in the midst of, I got hurt, I put on some weight, and he basically told me in the nicest way possible, hey, like, you need to get fit because you're not fit, right? And he could have told me what I wanted to hear, and he could have kind of sugarcoated, but he's like, I'm telling you because I love you and I care about you. Like, if you want to have any, chance at playing at the next level, like, you need to get fit, right? And I appreciated that, and because that's exactly what I did. And, I think honesty is always the best way to go, especially, when you're coaching, whether it's little kids or young adults. I think honesty is just, it carries a little more weight, in my opinion.
No, and it really like shapes the athlete because if you're telling them what they want to hear, it's more so honestly just steering them in the wrong direction.
Sure.
Just like having that like true honesty with them, it's gonna benefit them even if they don't see it automatically.
Sure.
So with that, like what do you think is the most important trait or skill a young player should focus on to make it professional?
I go back to this all the time, and I tell people this all the time. I played with some guys that were, in my opinion, better than me. I really did. I believe a lot of those guys were miles more talented than I ever was. What drove me apart from a lot of the guys is I was just determined and I was disciplined. And I remember I had teammates that would joke like, "You take this way too serious," and years later they were like, "Man, we should have listened to you." But I was determined. I was driven. I knew what I wanted. So I think to answer your question, whatever it is you want to do, like, just do it. And just know that it's hard work, because if it was easy, everyone would do it, right? So those things make the outcome that much sweeter. I feel like looking back in my career, like, I wouldn't change it for the world. Was it hard? Yes. Did I want to give up sometimes? Absolutely. But I think the biggest characteristic or the biggest, trait that I had was I was just determined and disciplined. And I really had no plan B. It's like, I'm either going to do this or I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And if I don't, well, then we'll figure it out, once we get there. But I think that's a trait that, and it's harder now, with social media, and now there's like all these expectations of like, you need to be here at this point, or you need to be here at this point. And that's far from the truth. Yeah. I think everyone's journey is different. I played with guys that things just came easier for them. I had to work at it, a little more. Fitness was something that I didn't love initially. And then once I started like, putting the work in and started seeing results, and, my performance is better because now I could play for longer periods and I'm not tiring. Like, those things go a long way. So to answer your question, and I'm kind of going off tandem here, but yeah, I think a characteristic of someone that wants to become a professional athlete or someone that's serious about their craft is just being disciplined. And that goes back to, you're going to give up certain things, whether that's your social life or, spending time with friends or, missing out on certain things. That's kind of the price you pay, essentially. But I think if you do things the right way, you will get rewarded, later on in life. And that's one thing my dad told me. He's like, don't worry, you're going to have time to do everything else. And he was absolutely right. Now that I'm kind of removed and now that I have my family, all the things that I wanted to do and couldn't do, I could do now. And now I'm enjoying them because I know that the times that I couldn't do it led me to the times that I could do it.
So it's a lot of sacrifice, honestly.
Totally.
And focusing on the minute details, the little details,
yeah,
honestly would push you over the edge.
Yeah.
And I know you mentioned social media now. So obviously social media wasn't as big as it is now, when you were playing. So what advice or what could you say to an athlete now based off social media, like how they can work around that, or like you said, standards, to not listen to those standards?
Right. There's a false sense of expectation again, and it's only natural with the amount of things that we see on social media. And I joke with people all the time. Everyone just posts their highlights. They don't really post like the tough things, right?
Yeah.
The getting up early on certain days, and you're on your way to a game in San Diego, so you're up at 5 in the morning. No one ever sees that, right? Everyone just sees like the glamorous side of things. I think the biggest thing is just I think you just mentioned it, the details. The details are important, and I was a player that I knew I wasn't ever going to be perfect, but I tried perfecting certain things to the best of my abilities, because that over time, just simplified and made things easier for me. I think now everyone just wants to do a million things, and hey, maybe let's just start here, and then once we kind of master this, let's go here, let's go here, let's go here, and that's kind of how you start layering, kind of your game, if that makes sense. But discipline, details, a lot of D words. I don't know why they all start with D, but yeah.
You talk about layering your skills, and obviously through high school, being a high school coach, you get so many players like of diverse playing style. So would you say being from a private school, you guys can handpick your athletes almost, or you get a little bit?
Sure.
How would you say like you adapt your team to the way you want them to play, or do you have them play just the way that they know how to play?
So you have to find a balance, and that's a great question, because you probably have a way of how you want to do things and how you envision things. For example, myself coming into Sierra Canyon just recently, the team was kind of already set. So now I'm like, okay, looking at, okay, this player is really good at this player is really good with this, and now you're finding ways to kind of complement each other, as opposed to, well, that's not really going to work. You have that, and that's essentially coaching, right? If you have the best player, or the pick of the litter, if you will, it's easy. You don't really need a coach, right?
Yeah.
If you have all the best players, I say, hey, just let them do their thing, and I'll just stand back here. The real coaching comes with, how do I make this guy who's maybe not the fastest, how do I make him, how do I highlight his skill set? Well, maybe I put him with the fast guy, but this guy's really, more technical. So now you start balancing and kind of creating. It's like, it's like baking a cake, right?
Yeah.
A little bit of this, a little bit of that. This kind of won't work. This is good. That's not